Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. So, tonight and tomorrow night we're talking about a topic which is extremely important for the Krishna consciousness movement. And we're not going to be addressing it from an external point of view. And an external point of view would mean, here's 5 things you can do to get along better. Because the challenge is not external, the challenge is internal. Because it requires a certain consciousness to be able to work with people. So I'd rather focus on that because I think that's what is essential and enduring. And it's my experience, if you learn an external skill without an accompanying internal attitude or change of consciousness that supports it, you won't be able to continue employing that skill. Unless, of course, your life depends on it and your job depends on it. But even then it's difficult. Whereas if you learn the proper attitude behind the skill, often you don't need to learn the skill. Can I give you an example? 2 people don't get along. You give them communication skills. Point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. Follow these communication skills. Does that mean that they'll be able to communicate well? Not necessarily. Number 1, they have to want to, and then they have to follow, and they may not really want to follow. But let's say, instead of giving them communication skills, I taught them how to get along as people, relationship skills, how to make a better relationship, not based on principles, but based on developing friendship, developing respect, developing trust, something more genuine. Then do you think we would have to teach them communication skills, or do you think they would naturally communicate better? What do you think?
They will naturally communicate better.
Because if you respect someone, you'll listen. Trust is the main relationship, one of the main necessities for relationship. So if you learn how to trust, if you learn how to respect, you learn how to empathize with another. These are what you could call soft skills, or in Krishna consciousness we would call these characteristics of a devotee. If you learn those, relationships will get better. So in everything that I do, I shy away from step 1, step 2, step 3 externals and focus on internals, because I found that you'll automatically do the externals if you have the internals, and if you have the externals and don't have the internals, the externals tend not to last long, if even last at all. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a little bit of self-exploration, because generally we find when we're dealing with communities and teams and so forth, and we're not getting along, the natural first inclination is to think or see or believe what's wrong with someone on the team. That's creating the problem, isn't it? The problem is you're the problem, isn't it? Generally, we isolate the problem as an individual, or perhaps as a policy, or perhaps as some dysfunction somewhere within the group, and we can point to it. This is the problem with the team. But there's a fundamental problem with that, because if everybody's doing that, how's it going to get better? Okay, what's the problem with the temple here? What's the problem with the organization? What's the problem with the department? Well, the problem is her, because she's this. The problem is him, because he's this. You ever think like that? You don't have to answer, because I know the answer. The answer is yes, right? So, one of the most important principles, and also one of the most difficult principles, is when you're looking to improve an organization, a team, a group, a family, is to start with yourself and ask yourself, what can I do to make it better? which in my experience is more rare than finding the problem with someone else. You agree?
Yes.
Only one person agrees?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's my experience. At least, I don't have all the experience in all the world, but unless somebody is trained to improve themselves, look at their fault as the solution, they generally won't look at the solution in terms of improving themselves. They'll look at it, they'll isolate the problem in somebody else. So, what is the biggest problem in the Hare Krishna movement? What is the biggest problem in the Soho Street Temple? What is the biggest problem in the Soho congregation? The answer, the right answer is me. That's the right answer. Not him or her. But I didn't want to embarrass you and ask you that question and have you come up with the wrong answer, so I gave you the answer. And I can guarantee you, if I asked you what the biggest problem was in this temple, you'd go from the top floor to the bottom floor, analyzing everything. Most of you would analyze everything but yourself. You agree? You don't have to say yes, you don't have to embarrass yourself, but that's my experience, that we don't normally look for ourselves as the number one problem. We look for, number one problem is we don't do this, or the number one problem is, I'm not saying those aren't problems, but if you're going to create a better group, you have to look at yourself. Because just imagine if everybody felt that way. That would be great, wouldn't it? Okay, what's the problem? We all say, I'm the problem, I have to improve. That would be fantastic. Right? You agree?
Yes.
It's not easy. Mother Teresa was asked, what is the biggest problem in the world? If we ask you that question, you might say, is Donald Trump. Seems like it, right? Or what's his name in Korea? Wang Chung-yong, what's his name? Yeah, is that his name? What's his name? Kim Chung-yong. Is that it? That's the biggest problem. Or maybe someone in Syria, or maybe someone in Iran. And Mother Teresa said, they said, what is the problem with the world? She said, the problem with the world is that I'm a sinner. That's the problem. So I think that's the spiritual perspective. What's the problem? The problem is I'm not pure. What else is the problem? That I'm not pure. That's the problem. Is that hard to accept? I mean, it's kind of obvious in a sense. At least that's how we should think. Now, we're going to do an exercise that's going to help you isolate this problem. So you need a partner. And the way, most of you are sitting, well, we have two, but then we have three. Priya, is there a seat next to you? If you could sit next to her. Well, then we have one lady who needs a partner. So have one odd lady, right? So, can you go downstairs and grab somebody?
Should I?
Yeah, it'll be good.
Anybody.
Otherwise, I have to be her partner, and I want to chant some rounds. Or somebody's coming? Is it a woman?
Yeah.
Or two? Okay. Okay. Can you two sit together? Because we're going to do an exercise. Okay. I'm kind of waiting for her to come back with somebody. Anyway, I can tell her. So, imagine you were in charge of this temple. And everyone in this temple... Okay, you found somebody? Oh.
They're busy in the kitchen, and downstairs there isn't anyone.
All right, then you'll be my partner. Or I'll be your partner. So, imagine you're in charge of the temple, and everyone in the temple is exactly like you. And so the question I want you to answer is, what wouldn't you like about everyone if they were exactly like you? So, or you could imagine a group of 7 of you working on a project. You're in charge of the project, and everybody's just like you. Now, I could ask you, what would you like about working? That's also legitimate, and it's also valid. But in light of the context of what we're trying to do, although that would be inspiring, and I think it would be helpful to, point out your good qualities, and sometimes we do that in workshops. In light of what we're trying to do, it's very helpful to isolate the things in yourself that other people may have trouble dealing with. And the reason this exercise is good is because we don't normally see ourselves from the perspective of others. So if we're hard to deal with, we're hard to get along, if we're doing something that may be upsetting, we don't normally notice it, right? So you might say, well, if everyone were like me, everyone would be late for meetings. And nobody would be at Mangalarti, and everyone would be asleep every morning at 10 o'clock. And if everybody didn't like my idea, they would just not do it. Or maybe they would say they would do it, and they wouldn't do it. Or they would refuse to do it. Or we'd all be fighting. You have to actually be thoroughly, brutally honest. What would it be like if you had to manage a group of people who had your attitude, your disposition? Now, maybe it would be great. You might say it would be fantastic. We'd get along. And if that's true, that's amazing. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be true, but if there is some idiosyncrasy that would make it difficult for you to work with yourself, you want to isolate it, because we're working on the premise that to improve cooperation, we should work on ourselves, because it never improves when you're trying to pull other people down. At least I've never seen it improve that way. At least for tonight, let's work with this premise, and then we can expand and discuss other aspects of working together. So, you're going to isolate what would be difficult, right? And you're really going to enter the mood of how my actions and attitudes affect other people. And then you're going to discuss with your partner what to do about it, how you could improve it, like isolate. Well, I'm like this, I'm like that, what can I do? Because we're working on the premise now that the best solution is to improve yourself. So, if that scares you, you can run out now and not come back tomorrow. Because you didn't think the class was about this, right, did you? You didn't think you had to do anything. So it's not, my workshops are never passive. They always engage you. And you can get a lot from this. And I would ask you, be brave, be vulnerable, be honest. And I can tell you a story about myself and how I became aware of this as an exercise, which is helpful. I did a training to do it was a self-development workshop. It's like 70 hours. You do it all week. And I wanted to do the training because I thought what I was learning would be helpful for teaching devotees and also helpful for teaching non-devotees. So when I was doing the training, I had arrived just after I finished my rounds, and I was very absorbed in my rounds. So when I went into the training, my body was there, but I wasn't there mentally. I was like somewhere else good. And then we would do exercises, and when we would finish the exercise, we would write our realization, and then we would present it. They had like 10 teachers there, and we would present it to the teachers, and they would read it. And by reading our realizations, they could determine if we had done the exercise properly. So they read mine, and they didn't really like it. I didn't get it or something. And then they were talking to me, and I was a little bit, I think I was still in my japa zone. I hadn't landed yet. And the facilitator, one of these teachers said, Mahatma, you are very distant. I don't feel like you're here. And I said, you're right, I'm not really here. And she said, well, how do you think it feels for people when you're interacting with them and you're not present? You're somewhere else. I didn't say anything. She said, I would like you right now to just take time, walk around, and meditate on how people feel when you're distant. And so it was a very interesting exercise because she was asking me to probe how my actions would affect other people. It's something I never really did before, I never really thought about. And I started to realize that often in my dealings with people, I'm not always there. I'm somewhere else, although I look like I'm there. And the more I thought about it, the more I kind of felt how frustrated people must be with me when I'm not present and we're dealing with one another. So it was an interesting exercise. So this exercise is a little bit like that. How do my idiosyncrasies or the difficulties that I may cause other people, how does that make them feel? And then we're going to talk about what to do about it. And those solutions are going to come from you, because you have the answers to all your problems. Did you know that? Yeah, you do. And now some of you are sitting there and thinking, do I really have the answers? Well, I'm just asking you to see what comes up. And if you want help from your partner, you can ask your partner, what do you think? If you don't want help, don't ask them, what do you think? So we have two partners. So one's going to start, you're going to tell your other partner, if everyone were like me, this is what I think would be a problem. Could be a little problem, a big problem. And then the second thing you'll say for each problem is how I think this, how I imagine now thinking about it, other people feel when I do that. And number 3, what can I do to improve? And Krishna will guide you how to improve. Because the principle is, as soon as you want to improve, Super Soul kicks in. And he gives you intelligence. And the only reason we don't have sufficient intelligence, I don't want to say the only reason, but generally we don't have sufficient intelligence because we don't have sufficient awareness and desire. You can't improve in something that you don't know needs improving, and we don't have awareness. And we don't have desire to improve it. So this will be also helpful for you in just realizing that many of us have problems that we don't know we have. Because I'm sure something is going to come up for you today that maybe you've never thought about. Well, I never really thought that I affect people this way. So that'll be good for you because you'll become aware of something you weren't aware of 10 minutes ago. And so that shows us that self-awareness is often blocked. We have blind spots, we don't see things. And there's much we can see about ourselves. So self-awareness is important. And then you'll realize by trying to solve the problem that if I become aware of a problem and sincerely want to try it, I can get insight in how to do it. So these are really great tools because you can apply this throughout your life. Become more aware through introspection of how you need to improve, and aware of the problem, and then tapping into the Super Soul and say, please, guide me. And if you feel you don't know the answer, put your hands up in the air. Say, Krishna, I don't know the answer. Please show me. And if you're really stuck, your friend, your partner, I'm sure can help you. So, do you have any questions about this exercise? Yes?
Excuse me, Mahatma Prabhu, can you please repeat those questions we are supposed to do as a task?
Okay. If I was in charge of a project, a temple, and everyone were like me, what wouldn't I like about working with those people? Not that I wouldn't like some things, but what are the things I wouldn't like? I'm not saying you're all bad. It's just, what is the something I wouldn't like that would make it difficult for me to work with myself? And then,
How many features shall we mention? How many features?
as
shall we
much
mention?
as you like. But specifically, the ones you think are maybe the most, that make it the most difficult to work for you, those are the ones you want to work on. And then the next question, how to improve. Yes?
Are we just focusing on the negatives or the positives as well?
What's that?
Are we focusing on just the negatives?
Just the negative tonight, unfortunately. If you really want to focus on the positive and you have time, the positive is good, but tonight I want to focus on the negative. Unless you have super low self-esteem and this could really depress you, then you should focus on some positive development. It's a fact. You know, if you're like, oh no, this will depress me, I'm already depressed, I already know how bad I am. If you feel like that, yeah, you should mention a few good things. Because I'm serious, if you really, on that level, it could be quite depressing. But we want to see it in a positive way, because we want to look at this as, if we want to contribute to this organization and be more cooperative and be better team players, it's really important to know in which ways we're lacking, which ways we can be better. At least, you can't change the organization, but at least you can change yourself, and at least you can contribute. Now, let me say a few things just before this, because this might help put things into context. When you join an organization, as you know, or you work on any team in any company, generally you don't choose the team. The team is there, and you're part of it. Okay, you. See that van? Get into it, come back next week. Here's 10 boxes of Gitas, don't come back until they're distributed. Now you're in a van with 3 other people. You didn't choose. Any of you been in that situation before? I spent maybe 10 years like that, or 20 or 30 years like that. So now if I can choose you, all my good friends, we're going to have a great time and getting along. We'll just be telling jokes and having fun, and it's easy. But when it's not chosen for me, and generally in the way the world works, it's like that, that's the challenge. So here we are. You're from this country, you're from that country, you're from this country, you're from that country, you're a Hindu, you're Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Jew, I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I never saw someone who wasn't Jewish for 18 years. Can you believe that? The only people I saw were white, wealthy, and Jewish for 18 years. And then I joined the Hare Krishna movement. It's the first time I met crazy people. I never met a crazy person before. I'm not saying devotees are crazy, but crazy people were coming to the temple. But it's true. A neighborhood where as far as you look in any direction, it's all white and all Jewish. And now I'm thrown in a van with not everybody white, not everybody Jewish, and we have to get along. So that's the challenge, right? It's not a choice. We're dealing with people that do things differently than we do. We have different values, different culture, right? Yes? If you go to Latin America, maybe Italy also, but if you go to Latin America, people do not shake your hand. They hug and kiss you. That replaces the handshake. Would that put any of you at ill ease, if that was what you had to do? Probably some of you. What if you're in the van now with a devotee He doesn't go Hari Bol, he hugs and kisses you. So these are the challenges we face, right? So Prabhupada said, if you fight, my mission will be destroyed. So the necessity of learning how to get along is pretty high, because Prabhupada felt if we didn't learn it, we couldn't spread Krishna consciousness. And we could further say, if you don't learn it, you won't even be able to stay married if you want to be married. We have to learn these skills. And from my experience, many of us don't have them. We actually don't know how to get along with people unless they're exactly like us. Did you ever look at someone and you don't know them and you thought, I don't like that person? You don't have to raise your hand. I know the answer. But I just thought I'd ask the question just to bring it to our attention. Of course the answer is yes. Why don't you like him? I don't know, I just don't like him. He's too fat. I don't like fat people. And that guy becomes a devotee and he's in your van. And you say, oh no, he's in my van. I don't like him. I'm not going. Right? Okay, before we do the exercise, we'll talk about a few other things. It'll make it easier for you to do the exercise. You think I'm joking, right? I'm not joking. These things happen. You know they happen. We are conditioned souls. These are real events. Even though the Hare Krishna movement is meant to be a pure spiritual movement, these things happen. We see some devotee, we don't know him, and in our mind we think, I don't like him. It happens. Or I don't like her. So, what is wrong with that picture? What is wrong with the picture of a Hare Krishna devotee saying, I don't like this person, whether or not they know you? Even if you know them, it's just as bad. I know them, I don't like them. What's wrong with that picture?
You're judging the body.
We're judging another devotee. Okay, what's wrong with the picture of judging another devotee?
We're supposed to believe that we're not this
Yes,
body.
yes. Okay, here's the problem. We have a book called Bhagavad Gita, and then we have us. So I developed a course, it's called the 19th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And the 18th chapters are about what you're supposed to be, and the 19th chapter is about what you are. And generally for most of us, the 19th chapter won't match the first 18. You agree? That's the problem. That's the challenge we all face, to get the 19th chapter to align with the first 18. You understand the first 18 chapters. It's in your head. You know it. You could give a class on it. You could give a class about not being prejudiced. We're not the body, we're not black, white, we see the soul, we don't discriminate. A Brahmin, we see a Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, equally, quote the verse, everything. We can talk about it. And then there's the 19th chapter. How do we live? How do we see? How do we relate? So, let's say I knew nothing about the Hare Krishna movement, I knew nothing about this temple, I knew nothing about devotees, but I read Bhagavad Gita, and after reading Bhagavad Gita, I accepted it, and then I found out there's a society of devotees. What would I think? I would think, this must be the most amazing society, because look at the principles they live by. Yes? Okay. What happens when you come to that amazing society? You see some of those people fall short of those principles. So in theory, if we lived the principles, we wouldn't even need this class. This is like, why do we have to have a class about cooperation? Look at, devotee is kind, he's humble, he's meek, he's patient, he's tolerant, he's clean, he's friendly, he's non-envious. If we all had a few of those qualities, we'd get along fine, right? Do we have problems getting along? Yes or yes? Why do we have problems getting along? Because we are humans, beings trying to become Krishna conscious, and we're living in the age of quarrel. And as we all know, things bother us, we're not always tolerant, we complain, it's difficult getting along. And we don't always like the way people do things. Now, does that make sense? So you see the challenge to get the 18th chapter to align with the 19th chapter to align with the first 18. That's the challenge. That's why we're here today. That's really what we're looking at. We have a lifestyle and we have a philosophy. They're supposed to be the same. Yes? You know, Prabhupada established a farm community in America. Well, he didn't establish it, the devotees did, and he called it Gita Nagari. And he said, this is meant to be a community where the Gita is lived. And Prabhupada said, in the city we're preaching, but we need to show how to live the philosophy. We need an example. So he wanted us to be exemplary. And then one time we went to India in 1975, and the devotees didn't have service, it was a festival, so they asked Prabhupada, they said, Prabhupada, what should we do here? And Prabhupada said, they said, what's our service? He said, your service is to behave perfectly. And he said, people will look at you and they'll say, your spiritual master must be amazing because you are amazing. So he said, they'll see your behavior and that will glorify me. Interesting. So, if you want to glorify Prabhupada, the best way to glorify him is be an example in your life of what he teaches. There's no better way to glorify Prabhupada than to be an example of what he teaches. You agree? That's it, you know. Jai Srila Prabhupada! No. I mean, yeah, that's good. But the real Jai Srila Prabhupada is you're exemplifying his teachings. You know, sometimes we're in situations, I just can't get along with this devotee, I can't cooperate, you know, and we're like at loggerheads and we don't want to compromise, or we have an issue with resentment, we don't want to give it up. That happens, right? But that's not exemplifying what Prabhupada wants us to be. So the idea of this exercise is to isolate where we may be out of alignment from what Krishna conscious person should be and what we can do to improve it. Now, as I said, this exercise won't be fun for you unless you're in the mood of doing that. Because it's, you know, it requires some shifting internally. But
Excuse me, what was the exercise again? Can you repeat?
He's going to tell you. The one in front of you will tell you.
Yeah, because...
After I finish, he'll explain.
I don't know why I didn't get a second.